Hi, I've decided to talk a bit about uh, some ideas that I've probably been nurturing for quite a few years, but have sort of come more into focus in the last couple of years. Um, what these are is ideas about sort of how to manage your emotions. Um, Managing your emotions can sometimes be difficult, particularly um, if you've encountered in a stress situation, it can be difficult to de-escalate from a level of high excitation. Generally, when you're threatened, you'll get a fight or flight response going, and that fight or flight response will continue to be egged on if there's ongoing threats, even if they're relatively little. If they're little things that don't go smoothly, little things can get under your skin, and maybe this is my hallucination, is that this happens with people other than myself. And my hallucination is that there's some ways you can help handle that. Some of them are more applicable to kind of making sure you don't carry it over from day to day, because that can get old really fast. The first thing in sort of emotional management that I ran across and thought was quite interesting was an approach called learned optimism, which was from Martin Seligman. He's basically was the former head of the American Psychological Association, and he did some studies, one of the classic studies on learned helplessness, which is basically that you could train an animal to be helpless, to not make an action when they could perfectly well avoid pain, to have them not avoid pain, because they no longer believed that they could do anything about it. You train them in a situation where they could not escape a negative situation, and then later they wouldn't try to escape even when the situation had changed and they now could. So that was referred to as learned helplessness, and it's one of the classic studies in psychology. Well, so over the years he became interested in how to not have that and what could protect you from that, and what he came up with was learned optimism. One of the things I really like about it, I've always been somewhat suspicious of optimism as an operating assumption, because I've always thought that it would sort of lead you into, that you'd be basically putting on rose-colored glasses and you wouldn't be seeing enough detail about what was going on around you to be able to properly assess and respond to your environment. Research seems to indicate that, well, that's not really true. The research that he quoted, which is the ones that he was involved with, basically indicated that essentially the most accurate assessment of whether you were going to succeed or fail would be done by people who are mildly more pessimistic than average. However, the success was strongly correlated with being at least somewhat more optimistic than average. In other words, pessimists know what the world really is, but optimists, even though they don't know what the world really is, end up achieving more. Yeah, so I've been doing things wrong. So that was an interesting thing, and one of the things I really liked about learned optimism is that he didn't just dismiss the idea that there was something to be concerned with being over-optimistic. What he did is kind of identify the situations. I mean, clearly you're not going to want somebody who's working a bomb squad to be overly optimistic. That could lead to very serious repercussions. So what he basically identified was the types of situations in which you should be looking at being optimistic. You should be looking at them when basically in dangerous situations, it might be better to be more cautious, to have a mild pessimism, to sort of preemptively think of things that might go wrong. But in situations where the benefit for success is high and the real negative side of failing is low. One example given was, asking people out on dates or doing sales calls, where the potential for benefit is high and the potential for, for serious problems is low. That you should be optimistic, even significantly optimistic. That made me a lot happier about, thinking about revising my way of looking at things, because it gives you a more, it gives you a better guide as to when it's appropriate. Another thing I would like to I'm trying to watch the time a little bit, because I actually did make a previous tape of this, but it got way the hell too long. The other thing that I fairly recently encountered is actually kind of a form of meditation. It's, as far as I know, the simplest form of meditation you can possibly do, which is maybe why I can do it, at least sometimes. Basically, it comes straight out of a book, which is this book, The Relaxation Response, which I have a copy of because I thought it was really good. And essentially what it really boils down to like about a 2-page technique. Now I'm going to go over it very, very briefly, even more briefly than 2 pages. Basically, what you do is get yourself in a comfortable place where you're going to be able to spend 15 to 20 minutes undisturbed, and arrange for yourself to be undisturbed, like, pull out the phone or whatever you have to do to be undisturbed for that period of time. Rest in a comfortable position, breathe slowly, deeply, and repeat to yourself silently, and for some people, depending on preference, with your eyes open or closed, it doesn't really matter. Repeat just the word 1 to yourself, the number 1. And basically breathe in, exhale, repeating 1. And the only reason to do that, basically what the attempt was, I think the origin of this is basically that the people that began this were interested in transcendental meditation, but they understood that Western medicine was not ready to take a spiritual practice into itself. So what they did was tried to isolate essentially the active ingredient. They treated it like any other form of therapy, and they tried to isolate the minimal active ingredient. They did a literature search, documented it, and basically went through this and did proof on cancer patients that it reduced their pain, reduced their need for medication, allowed them to be calmer as they approached, basically that it assisted them. It assisted them in in quality of life before let's say surgery, being able to tolerate the pain after surgery with less medication, and that sort of thing, and therefore causing less complications. But basically what it was done is it was done in such a way, the research was done in such a way, they simplified it, made it not a non-spiritual practice, which is good for people like me. And I'm an atheist. So basically what they did is they made it as simple as possible. They proved it in a clinical setting, and so there's now a very simple practice that's available, and I think it's highly useful. Well, maybe I'll have to get into this another time because I really am out of time. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you've got anything else to say, you want to comment or point me in a different direction, I'd be happy to hear it. Thank you.